Ladies and gentlemen, before the last of our speakers comes up on the platform, I have one or two suggestions to pass along. It has been brought to my attention that a week from today, on the Issues and Answers program, there will be a very important interview with George Wallace. And many of us have been urged to pay particular attention to what he will have to say on that program. Also, one of the people here at the rally has made what sounds to me like a happy suggestion. You remember the fuss that there has been about the space stamp and the objections that were raised by people like Madalyn Murray O'Hair to the use of the phrase, "in the beginning, God." And the courageous stand taken by the Postmaster General in keeping that phrase on the stamps as they have been reissued. And it is suggested that that is one way in which conservatives can do a little bit of propaganda at no additional expense to themselves. And some people think it would be more satisfactory to be putting that stamp on an envelope than one of the other recent issues. So I pass that suggestion along. You may have difficulty in getting them. Some of the post offices may not be stocking them, but there again is a chance to do a little propaganda by saying, "I want that stamp. And if you don't have some, how soon can I get some here?" Then also, and perhaps I really should give credit to Mr. Krager for that suggestion. Then also, at the suggestion of Mrs. Dan Smoot, I would like to suggest that the audience stand just for a moment of silent tribute to one of the great fighters on our side who has died recently, Dr. Bella Dodd. Thank you. I need not remind you of the great contribution that Dr. Dodd made to our fight. She was one of the ones who had done a great deal of harm at one time in her life. And as Mrs. Smoot tells me, when she repented and decided to go back into the Catholic Church, that she told Monsignor Sheehan that she wanted to do penance for the rest of her life. And what would he think of her idea of her going into a convent and devoting the rest of her time to sincere penitence? And he laughed at her, much to her amazement. And then he said, "But Dr. Dodd, where was it that you did the harm?" And she said, "Mostly on the campuses." And he said, "Well, that's where you should do your penance." And that was what she did, most effectively. May I? Whenever you want. Needless to say, we're delighted that you approve of our selection of a final speaker. And we are indeed fortunate, because I don't suppose there's anyone any more courageous in legislative circles anywhere than our speaker. And because of that, we wanted to have as hostess here this afternoon another very courageous American who has not been afraid to speak out on many occasions, who through her work with the Women for Constitutional Government and their publication and her own local paper, I call it local, but that's only because it deals primarily with local news, but has other very valuable material in it, the Summit Sun. We are more than happy to have with us again a very distinguished lady that you have come to know from previous occasions here. She has been one of our most devoted friends and one of our most effective propagandists, and I am delighted to present to you again Mrs. Mary Dawson Kane.
Thank you, Colonel Bunker. It's always a great moment in my life to come back to Boston. And were it not for Anna McKinney, I wouldn't be here today. But she phoned me 3 times when she found out I couldn't come and said, "You must come." And she began to tell me all the wonderful people who would be here. And I said, "I know, I've read every word of it. I'm yearning to be there, but I have such a full schedule, I can't do it." And then she said, "But I want you to introduce John Rarick." And I said, "Well, Anna, you know I couldn't refuse to do that." I can't truthfully say that we've saved the very best for last, because all of our speakers have been so very wonderful, and I know that you were, as I was, deeply touched by Tom's marvelous address. But I'm going to say to you that I believe that we have, in one sense, saved the best for last because of his position in the Congress and his invaluable work to the cause of conservatism. I have thought often of those lines, and I know that most of you are familiar with them, by Hiram Mann, a wonderful old man in New York who used to send me little tiny poems, 4 lines written on a postcard, and or a piece of wrapping paper, or a paper bag out of a grocery store, anything he could find to write on. And this one really became a classic among the true libertarians. He said, "No man escapes when freedom fails. The best men rot in filthy jails. And those who cried, 'Appease, appease,' are hanged by those they tried to please." I think that's the most powerful 4-line poem that I have ever in my life read, and it's something that each of us can memorize and carry with us. This man who will speak to us today is a man who knows the truth of those 4 lines, and the service that he has already rendered is immeasurable in Congress and to our entire nation. John Rarick was chosen the Man of the Year by Women for Constitutional Government because of his outstanding work in the Congress. It was the first time we had ever given such an award, but we felt that he deserved it because he has been out in front, right on the line. His courage simply matchless, because he has been attacked from right and left. Now, when he was up for re-election, they teased him a great deal because they said, "Well, how is your campaign going, John?" And he said, "Well, it's going very well in Mississippi," because I was carrying these ads. Anything that I found in the Louisiana papers, I had to beat the drum for John Rarick, because all of my kinfolks are from Louisiana, and I knew they'd beat the drum too. But this young man, and he is young. Of course, I feel that as long as there's anybody in the world left who's a little bit older than you, you're not really old. But this young man is a very successful attorney, and for 5 years he served as district judge before he was elected to Congress. Then, last year, despite the fact that he was running against a so-called conservative in Louisiana, he just overwhelmingly defeated the other man. And it was simply because of his marvelous record in Congress. John Rarick volunteered for the Army in World War II at the age of 18. He served for over 3 years and received numerous commendations. He was awarded battle stars. He was also decorated with the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, and the Belgian decoration for gallantry in combat. Captured in the Battle of the Bulge, he spent 4 months in a Nazi prison camp from which he was resourceful enough to escape, and after 13 days rejoined the American forces. Congressman Rarick's voting record in Congress has been one of strict adherence to constitutional pro-American principles. He has consistently voted for America and opposed all attempts to socialize the nation, to centralize power in Washington, to destroy sovereignty of the individual states, to disarm the United States, or to include America in any one-world scheme. He has supported every effort to limit federal spending, to reduce crime, to restore the soundness of the dollar, to combat inflation and thus increase the buying powers of the consumers' dollars, and to curb riots and mobs. ACA gives him a rating of 89%. Liberty Lobby rates him 100%. Dan Smoot gave him the second highest rating. James Utt of California was the only one ahead of him, and just by 1 point. A member of the Baptist Church, Mr. Rarick is a member of the American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, Disabled American Veterans, Masonic Order, Shriners, Moose, Order of George Washington, and the Farm Bureau. When did you ever do any farming, John? He was born and reared in Indiana. I should have told you. He is an Indianian by birth, but he is a Southerner by choice. He is also past president of his hometown Civitan Club in the Toastmasters International. He recently accepted chairmanship of the Supreme Court Amendment League, SCALE it's called for short, and I'm sure you found some of the material out there on SCALE, an organization dedicated to limiting and reforming the Supreme Court. He says the Supreme Court's powers must be curbed, and I think we are all in agreement. Congressman Rarick and his lovely wife have 1 son and 2 daughters, all in their late teens. And I'm not going to take more of his time, but I did want to say to you and to John that to me, the battle must be won in Washington. And I'm grateful for his presence there, because I know that he is doing everything that a human being can do to further the cause of constitutional government. And I thank God for him every day of the world. I thought of those immortal words of Daniel Webster as I think of John Rarick. You remember that he said, "I was born an American, I live an American, I shall die an American, and I intend to perform the duties incumbent upon me in that character to the end of my career. I mean to do this with absolute disregard of personal consequences." What are personal consequences? What is the individual man with all the good or evil which may betide him, in comparison to the good or evil which may befall a great nation, and in the midst of great transactions which concern that nation's fate? Let the consequences be what they will. I am careless. No man can suffer too much, and no man can fall too soon. If he suffer or if he fall, in defense of the liberties and the Constitution of his country. And John, I found a copy of this outside, these beautiful little things that they do out there. I don't think there are very many, so you better hurry if you want one too. But John, I wanted you to have this as a token of my very high regard for you as a real, honest-to-God American.
Thank you very much, Sister Mary, my beloved fellow countrymen. It's indeed a rare privilege for me to be back in Boston. I say to be back because 25 years ago, September of this year, I boarded an Army convoy in the harbor of Boston, and I haven't seen it since. So let's hope that perhaps the home of the Boston Tea Party will again feel the change of the times, because they are among us. And the change is blowing back this time with us, the Americans. Coming up this morning from New Orleans, I had to leave my state at 4 o'clock. I was amazed to pick up the newspaper. There was nothing in there about the New England rally. But there's a very nice picture and a story about Dr. Spock holding some kind of a demonstration in the Boston Commons. And it seems that what he wants is to give away some more of your money. And of course, I was looking at that picture and remembering that the Declaration of Independence was provoked because of taxation without representation, which was condemned by the free people, our ancestors, as being tyranny. And then I was asking myself, if that was tyranny, taxation without representation, what is representation without taxation? Be it from the welfare rights organization, or be it from the big tax-free foundations and the some 21 millionaires who didn't even pay a penny's worth of tax last year. I really accepted the invitation to come, not knowing that Miss Mary would be here, because she is my teacher. Everything that I learned about the Constitution after I became a judge was through her paper and her devotion as being an American who was not afraid to stand up and be counted. And I thought by coming here that perhaps I could show the American people the cost of free speech at this late hour. And bear in mind, my fellow countrymen, that as an elected member of Congress, from this hour on, it's open season on John Rarick of Louisiana. I also wanted to visit with you because, you see, there's really very little difference between we of the South and you of the North, and especially since I am a Southerner by choice. And yet every time one of us Southerners gets up in Congress or in any area where there are some of these fast-talking liberals, regardless of how well we prepare our case or document the evidence, the immediate response is, well, pay no attention to him, he's a Southerner. And after a while, people actually begin to believe that there is a difference between American people because of the area in which they live. And suddenly we start counting the Souths. We have South Vietnam. We have South Korea. We have South Rhodesia. We have South Africa. We have Southern United States. And I'm just hoping if there's anyone here from South Dakota that you'll get your man straightened out, or at least change the name, because it infringes upon our integrity. But you see, the southern people of the United States are different Americans. Many of them haven't even thought of it themselves. But they're different because these are the descendants of the only American people that have lived in an occupied area. Many of our folks in the South remember their grandparents telling them what it is to be a prisoner in your own home. Yes, these were our cousins and our Yankee brethren from the North, but the Southerner has lost his freedom once, And he's going to stand up and he's going to bay like a coon dog because he doesn't want to lose it again. That's why I was so happy to be able to at least speak on the same platform with another true blue Southerner by the name of Tom Anderson from Nashville, Tennessee. In my land, you folks haven't seen anything yet. We're filled with the hills down there in the South with people like that. We can line them up for months to come if we could just keep the Supreme Court and put in injunctions against us. Well, I think that the answer to Dr. Spock and to the ever-growing legions of the voting bloc known as the welfare recipient is that we live in a competitive, productive, individual society. This is what has made America the greatest country in the world in 190 years of individual liberty. And if these people don't want to produce and they don't want to compete, then get out of the road, because there are a lot of individuals and there's plenty of room at the top. I can say these things because I'm a Democrat. And I oppose LBJ when he was wrong, and I'm certainly not going to line up with Tricky Dick just because he's a Republican. We all were hopeful that perhaps we would be alleviated from the many birds we had in Washington. And now we end up when we've got a goldfinch, and we've got a blackbird and a dicky bird. And of course, the other day, we had James Farmer down in my area at LSU. He's one of these administrative experts with Hugh. I can't get that P out of there. And someone down in the Southland that reads, you know, we're not all illiterate. You see, James Farmer was educated in the South. Rap Brown's a graduate of Southern University in my district. I very seldom say that. And his father is a good working man, union member, and a fine citizen in the community. Someone had taken on Goldfinch because they had read Dr. Jensen's article from the University of California at Berkeley. In other words, how far can we increase IQ because of environmental changes? And this environment versus heredity has become a great taboo among the scientists. It's a hot potato. You know, if you even mention it, you're immediately called a racist. And I'm going to put your hearts at rest should you regard me being a racist merely because I'm a Southerner, because I despise a lot more white people than I do black people, so I don't consider myself being a racist. But James and Bobby, it seems, had been worried about Dr. Jensen's report because he said that all the 40-some billions of your money, you know, they call it federal funds, but they don't make it up there. It comes out of your paychecks mostly. The 40 billions of dollars last year that went into helping the poor people, creating jobs, environmental changes, hoping that we can improve the underman to make him the equal that he's supposed to be if he's going to live in accordance with Earl Warren's edicts. That all of this really didn't end up producing any results. It was just down the drain. So someone got a hold of James and they said, now, Mr. Farmer, they said, what are you going to do up there in HEW because of all these attacks and this scientific proof that all of your environmental studies, Head Start included, and model cities and all of this is a waste of taxpayers' money. It doesn't produce but a minimum of results, if any. And his reply was, well, we are getting a hold of the children too late in life. At 5 years of age, they have already gotten into the rut, you see, with all the prejudices from their parents. So what we're going to do is we're going to swing down and start taking these young American babies at 2 years of age. And in some instances, we're going to take these young babies and put them into dormitories so they're not influenced by the corruption, etc., of their parents. Of course, maybe that means that in these dormitories they might teach some of these young chaps to bathe and to shave themselves and to get back into the human family. You know, I don't really get worried or upset anymore about all these hippies and all, because these people are just acting out, as the psychiatrists tell us. And you know, if you want to really make them mad, you can just look at them and say, well, the last laugh won't be yours, it'll be ours, because when you have children, they grow up, they're going to resent you and your discipline, so they're going to turn right around and shave and cut their hair and put shoes on, rebel against you, and they'll flip right back like us. But Hitler was a piker. And Castro really didn't know how far he could go compared with the plans that are being thrown around by the educators having to do with prenatal care. Prenatal, this means before the baby's born, of the American children. I'm looking out there as hard as I can, and I know some of you are under 30, and you're bound to have some grandchildren, and this should really concern you. And some of the later reports coming out of the University of Indiana and Columbia and various wonderful institutions are even talking about the use of drugs on unborn babies to try to give them proper nourishment, or whatever they use these terms, in their brains, so that they will be born all equal. Now, I don't know how much environments you can change in a baby and all in the same womb, if there any difference. But these people are way ahead of us on education. And I mean, sex education, it isn't even in the picture anymore when you consider how far these social experimenters are going to use the next generation of our kids as guinea pigs. You know, my wife and I are sexual illiterates. We can't read and write in it. I was so hoping before I left home this morning that our grandbaby would arrive. So we've got 3 children expecting a grandbaby. And if you have to be able to read and write in sex to vote, I won't even be able to register to vote in the new federal elections. Then I ran into some interesting material. Everybody said that if you can recognize that the Sikis material is perversion and uncouth, it's not really education at all, then you must be a John Bircher. And I kind of resent that. Because I'm not a Bircher, and I know of a lot of people who don't like anything to do with Sikis and all this sex jamming they're trying to do in the schools. What are we going to do about it? Louisiana, we have a very interesting state. The lower part of our state are mostly the French Catholic people. The upper part are the rednecks, like Miss Mary here, the Mississippi caliber. And we always have a little friction. And of course, the Baptist folks up north, they get all emotional. You start talking about interfering with their children. The French people, they took it kind of lightly. They said, oh, what do you want them to do? Learn all this sex in the pool room or in the bar room, or sitting out along the lake? Don't you know somebody slipped into the legislature down there and they got a bunch of these movies and books and some of the educational guides? And they had a little committee room. They brought all these legislators in. You know what Louisiana did? They went right into session and they forbid all sex education in the whole state, at least the next year when they can look into it further. I don't believe the revulsion of a loving parent for the invasion in the dignity of their child belongs to any political spectrum. I have found the liberals and the moderates and the conservatives and the right-wingers and the left-wingers all almost equally incensed at the whole idea. Some of them believe in Planned Parenthood. Some of them believe in teaching preparatory to marriage. But none of them believe in the perversion. And it's not sex education. You know the difference between an educator and an educationist, don't you? The educator really believes in trying to teach children to develop an inquisitive mind, while the educationist, all he's trying to do is promote himself in office and get a raise and get more people on his staff. If we just had more of the educators instead of the educationists, and the educators were teaching American history, we wouldn't be to the point where we'd have to even think about teaching sex education. Well, the other day, before Earl Warren left, some of you remember him, he hadn't been gone that long. His wonderful oracle there, that ever-sitting Constitutional Convention, that takes our laws from Congress and turns them around and says we didn't say what we meant and we didn't mean what we said. Came out and he ruled, he said that there shouldn't be any state residency requirements for the welfare recipient. Following right behind this wonderful decision was an order by most of the federal housing authorities that no city or state could set up residency requirements in order for a welfare recipient to get free housing in a public housing unit. Then last Friday, the Attorney General of the United States testified before the House Judiciary Committee saying that President Nixon was hopeful of extending the Voter Rights Act, not just to we in the South, the 7 states, but he wanted to make it nationwide, and he wanted to remove all literacy requirements and residence requirements on voters in presidential elections. Let's carry that quick to a conclusion. How long do you reckon I'm going to be able to stay in public office when they can round up an army of federally sponsored welfare recipients who've got free housing without any residency requirement and who've now going to be a nationally registered voter, and they can just move anywhere around the country just like an army and vote people in and out of office? Well, a lot of people you say that to say, well, I'm not worried about that because if they do that, I'll register and I'll go to Louisiana and I'll vote for you. Yeah, but you're taxpayers. You've got to stay home and support your family and pay the taxes and raise your kids. You can't do that. Well, the amazing thing about it was that here for 5 years, we in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, parts of North Carolina and Virginia, we've been under the Voting Rights Act. No one cares about what happened to us in the South. All the Voting Rights Act that was passed by old LBJ said that any time the Attorney General of the United States felt we were using any of our laws in our respective states to discriminate, whatever that means, the Attorney General had the right to walk right in and supersede or put aside our state constitution and enforce the federal laws. This meant we brought federal people in our polls. They stood in our voting booths. They registered various people that we had no way of knowing who was being registered. In fact, in Louisiana today, I guess we don't even know who's on the roll. And I thought that they had registered everything that still could walk, and probably half of the graves. And suddenly here comes Mr. Manny Sellers from New York, Wall Street, and other place east. And Mr. Sellers says, well, we don't dare let that Voting Rights Act expire, because if we do, the people in the southern states will again be able to pass their own laws. Mr. Nixon was a little bit tricky again. He came in, he said, well, Mr. Sellers, I think that's such a good law. Let's make it apply to all 50 states. And you could hear the screams of anguish and the teeth gnashing all over Capitol Hill. Those New Yorkers and Massachusetts people and Illinois people, they said, oh, no, we don't want that in our state. We're going to vote for it in the southern states, but we don't want it in our state. That'd be illegal, unconscionable. Well, I thought we were all equal, one man, one vote. And I really didn't have many people that thought that we were still conquered provinces. Did you realize that we only have 43 states in the United States? And that 7 of us are still colonies? We don't have the right of self-determination. You and your state have the right to pass your bills and your laws and set some requirements on residency and who votes and where your voting areas are. But not we in the South. And if they water down the bill again, we in the South are going to be denied our full equal status as a state for another 5 years. The last time it was under a Democrat. This time it's under a man who says he's a Republican. And the bill was just as rotten under LBJ as it's going to be under President Nixon. And the most liberal statement that George Wallace ever made was when he said he thought there might be a dime's worth of difference. We hear a lot these days about malnutrition. They say they can look in the eyes. You can't be a doctor anymore and tell whether people have malnutrition. And, of course, if you've been talking to these chiropractors and these health food people, they'll tell you what causes malnutrition. That's all the stinking food and junk they got on the groceries and places these days that they're selling to people for food. We've been accused of malnutrition in the South. And everybody knows that Louisiana, at least, is in the old long state, while we're the original socialist state in the United States. We invented welfare and charity hospitals. Why should they point the finger at us and say that we've got any more malnutrition among our poor people than the children of multimillionaires on Wall Street? Because it doesn't make any difference how many food stamps or how much money you got in your bank account. If you don't eat good food and a balanced diet, all the money in the world is not going to give you good nutrition. And when did our people start starving? We in the South have got the most fertile land in the world. We've been growing your beans, we've been growing your peanuts, we've been growing your cotton. We've been growing everything for the Northerners for centuries. Now, of course, if some people suddenly get on the dole and they don't have time to go out and grow them a little garden to supplement their eating, I don't think any law you pass in Congress is going to force anybody to go out and plant a garden and take care of it. Of course, that's terrible. That means you'd have to work. But there are very few people that are going to starve without doing some working first. Then I hear all these statistics. This is a wonderful thing if you're a statistician, because you can prove anything. You can prove we aren't even born, or you can prove we're dead. In fact, one statistician told me he had statistics that showed that there wasn't any difference between being in the rut and being in the grave. He said it's just a matter of how far you're in the ground. But we hear these statistics that 20% of the Negroes are unemployed, as against only 10% of the whites being unemployed, give or take a few percent. So this means that we are supposed to go out and give more jobs to the Negroes. Well, why not carry the statistics on a little bit further, see what really the problem is? Using the figure 200 million citizens in our country, the Negro population is 10%. That would mean then that there would be 2.6 million of the Negroes who are unemployed. But there are 190 million other than Negroes, and of them 10% are unemployed, which would mean 19 million whites. If we're going to talk about equality, let's quit putting people in various groups and branches, and let's just say if we're going to help people, let's help people who are unemployed. Because we've got a lot more white people apparently going hungry than we do the Negroes today. But of course, the politicians have trouble using these figures, because you see some of them have trouble reading and writing, but that tax money votes. And the main difference today is elections in some areas just cost a little bit more money. And if you believe in equality and it's there, why are these people afraid to actually practice equality? If we believe that everybody has an equal opportunity, an equal chance under God, an equal chance before law, let's let equality at least try to work its way. Let's not immediately go over and say, here's some man or class of man, and he's been downtrodden too long, so we're going to elevate him and make him unequal. Because the minute those federal judges and bureaucrats say that, then they're proving that what they say about equality doesn't work. And they're not giving the people an equal chance. We in the South, now burdened with guidelines from HEW. Can you imagine federal judges? Federal judges, this was an office that was invoked and set up to protect you, the individual, from the tyranny of an all-powerful central government. Protect the individual liberty. Miss Mary's state and my state, in just the last few weeks, they barked out and they've said freedom is now illegal. They said freedom of choice and education, just letting people go where they want to go, pick out their school the closest to home, is now illegal because it does not attain a desired goal. You remember voting on any of those goals? It's dangerous, I would say, when federal judges order freedom illegal. And this has nothing to do with a man's race, creed, color, national origin. Because remember this, these decisions have got a funny way of one day maybe pushing you down the road, and the next day you're looking right down the barrel. And when you start talking about freedom being a crime in the United States, remember why the Declaration of Independence was signed? Because we didn't want any more kings. And we wanted the chance as individuals to be in this competitive, productive society that any man that puts out and works by his own effort is going to proceed. And they've been doing it. And they're going to do it. Because any man today on the labor market who can earn his salt, you know as well as I do, is going to be way receiving more than the minimum wage. I just wonder what these federal judges sometimes think freedom is. You suppose they think freedom is a bird in a gilded cage? An animal in a corral? How do they define individual liberty under God? We're not all one people. We're only one people in our common determination to make our system of government work and continue. We're not groups and races and creeds. We're individuals. That's what the Constitution was all about. The First Amendment doesn't guarantee you anything. It simply says that Congress shall pass no law, which means that the federal government was intended to be prohibited from interfering in every one of the precious rights and liberties that we have, which were given us not by man, but by God. Have I got any more time? And we've had the very interesting spectacle here recently of those who in the North would cry and complain about the poor Negroes from the Southland who were flooding your cities and causing riots and commotion. And be frankly, I've had some of your members perhaps tell me, we're going to ship them back home, that's where they belong. Well, we've lived together for 100 years. If you look back after the Civil War, you will realize that the South was completely desolate. Both white and black people lived off the ground. They both either had to go up or starve to death. But suddenly we have seen the attacks on the sugarcane industry in the South. We don't grow enough sugarcane in the United States to feed the American people now. We have to import it. One of these world arrangements. Next thing we found was the rice products being attacked. And here just recently it was tobacco. Tobacco now is the only thing that creates cancer. And there was a big propaganda upheaval. Well, I can remember Pocahontas and people way back in those days smoking tobacco. And tobacco pipe smoking was a sign of peace, the peace pipe. But think, as they constantly destroy the agriculture economy of the Southland, who's being hurt? The farmer, the people who were off welfare. They were a lot better off living down in the agrarian section of the South than they are piled into these housing units in the North, unhappy. Maybe they're getting a big welfare check, but what can they do? And you know what the next one's going to be? The next attack? Peanuts. You're going to be told that peanuts cause cancer. I don't know what else they got that they can do to completely devoid us in the South of our agriculture economy. But the most interesting thing, I never hear any of these bureaucrats complain about fluoridated water. I never hear any of them remind the American people about the evils of alcoholism, the millions of people that die every year with cirrhosis of the liver, the mental institutions that are filled with people whose brains are dissolved out by too much alcoholism. But I guess alcoholism is made from corn and potatoes, and these crops must be grown in the North and in the Midwest. But give them time, and I'm afraid, friends and neighbors, unless we start seeing through this design to de-agriculturalize the American people so we are unable to feed our own. You know, we hear that we're overpopulated and we're starving to death. Well, how can they tell you that in one breath and then come before us in agriculture and say you're producing too much, plow this under, we'll pay you not to grow it? Rather a double standard, is it not? The untouchables. This morning as I was leaving Baton Rouge, my son happened to pick up a copy of the paper that was just out on Sunday morning. I spoke twice on the 4th of July in my district. Patriotic speeches, I guess, are out of style. There's no news merit in them. There's nothing sensational about anyone wanting to help his people and save the country, to get the wars over and to stop communism. This is not sensational enough. But in the paper, there's a very interesting announcement. Big headlines. It says, Rarick to speak to Birch Society Patriotic Rally. Washington, D.C., U.S. Representative John Rarick, Democrat, Louisiana, will join another ex-Governor George Wallace supporter Sunday as a speaker in the final session of the John Birch Society's 7th Annual For God, Family, and Country Rally in Boston, Statler Hilton Hotel, according to the Institute for American Democracy, which is one of the satellites of the ADL. And it goes ahead, and of course it suggests that I'm a right-wing extremist. Well, it's very good writing, and it does a real fine job. If I have to come up here to get something, at least my name in my own newspaper, I'd like to know where these IAD people are, and I'll put them on my press releases, and maybe they can keep attacking me, and at least I'll get some news coverage. Because I had to read this news release to understand that you folks are enjoying an historic first, and I am really proud to have been invited, because this says that Rarick is the first congressman ever to address the Birch event. And then coming through Atlanta this morning, I don't know if you folks know what uruhu means. Uruhu. Well, Associate Justice Thurgood Marshall, in addressing a group of the law students in my district, got up and he used uruhu, uruhu, uruhu 3 times. And that merely means freedom now in Swahili, I guess, Southwest Africa. But on the front page of the Atlanta Journal and the Constitutional, it used to be Ralph McGill, one of my best friends. He used to attack me all the time, and he got me elected every time he did it. But there's a very nice picture here, and it says that Kenya's Maboya was slain in Kenya, Africa. I don't mean this for applause. The only reason I even use it, Maboya, of course, was one of the people involved in the Mau Mau matters in Kenya. And I was thinking it's a shame that this same newspaper couldn't have given at least equal space when Moise Shambi died of a broken heart in a communist Algerian prison camp. A broken heart because his Christian compatriots, we of the free world, our country, the United Nations, Great Britain, didn't do one thing to free him from that stinking, lousy prison camp. I made a short speech for Moise Shambi. I called him a Christian martyr who died for you and me. Then in the same paper, you may not have read it, it had a big announcement that Earl Warren is going to work on world peace. And all I can say is if Earl does as good a job for world peace as he's done causing riots and commotions and criminality and all in the United States, the world is shot. We're gone. If you don't think we're in bad shape, he's going over to Mount Scopus, sit up there on that mountain and issue world and court injunctions. And it says the others on the board with him are Vice President Hubert Humphreys, Prime Minister Lester Pearson, formerly of Canada, and Arthur Goldberg. And our dear compatriot Harry Truman in Missouri. Of course, Harry is getting up there in age. Harry says that he wants to venture a suggestion, a simple solution to all belligerents. Now listen to this, because he's correct. Leave your neighbor alone. Do not covet anything that belongs to another person. Let them work out their way and destiny, and do not impose your so-called help unless they ask it and want it. I say amen, but Harry, you will never get it with Earl Warren. The present administration, they tell me, lost the state of Texas in 1968. It went to Mr. Humphreys. But the present administration had become very keen in the art of taxes. last week the surtax was passed, and if you have a Republican congressman, 99% of them voted for it. They teamed up and said, well, we voted against it last year, so this year we'll vote for it. I guess that must have been their philosophy. But if you've had a chance to see them over the 4th of July and they tell you that they're sorry that, they had to vote the party system and all, don't let them fool you with that. That surtax hasn't gone through yet. It goes to the Senate, and we have reliable information to think that some of the New Yorkers and some of the Midwestern liberals are going to demand a little bit of help, not for you taxpayers, but for somebody else that doesn't pay it. They call that reform, you want to watch these reforms. But anyway, if the Senate tacks any amendment onto the surtax bill, then it has to come back again to the House of Representatives, and every one of your congressmen can have another chance. He can redeem himself with you if you let him know where you stand. And the surtax, wouldn't that be terrible if the surtax failed? You're told we need to pass a surtax for inflation. Good land, they did that a year ago, and what happened? The interest is now up to 8.5% in the District of Columbia. They've increased the bill now to allow up to 16% in interest charges. Well, they don't loan any money anyway. It's all public housing now in the District of Columbia. But very few people can remember even the 6 months of the present administration. The first month, he doubled his own salary. He raised all the congressional, the federal judges, and the senators' salaries by 41%. Came right back in, gave $480 million to Robert McNamara and the World Bank. Came right back in and increased the national debt, put another mortgage on your grandkids. Then he came out and he said, well, we need to do something to stop inflation. I have never been educated enough to accept the philosophy that the working man, the productive citizen, by taking his dollars out and spending it causes inflation. But to take that same money away from him and give him to a bureaucrat and give him back a little bit of it to do something he doesn't want doesn't cause inflation. So remember this. You still have a chance to be heard on the surtax if you didn't think your representative voted according to your wishes and wants. We're in a serious problem, I think, in America, but I believe that we can see a lot of daylight. And I have confidence enough that as long as the American people have free elections and have a chance or a choice, that the will of the American people cannot be denied. The winds of change are blowing. In Los Angeles, the pollsters have even given up trying to conduct polls. And if that wasn't enough to give them the hiccups, they went to Minneapolis, Minnesota. And there was Officer Spinvig, police officer. Said he believed in law and order and he wanted to stop these rioting demonstrations. He wanted to take some of the handcuffs off his officers. He took on the National Democratic Party, the National Republican Party, the State Republican and State Democratic Party, ran against a man that even had the open endorsement of the President of the United States. And the people of Minneapolis rose up and they said, that's the man we want because we want what he's talking about. We want that law and order stuff. We haven't had it. Then we moved over to the great metropolis of New York City. One of the great young youth, the leaders of tomorrow, living today. And certainly no one could consider any of the people of New York casting a ballot against Mayor Lindsay. Only the racists and the extremists and the right-wingers and the kooks would not be able to see the tremendous job this man had done with the United Nations. In my land, there was an upset. Someone said, well, the Irish people didn't vote the way they were supposed to. Another one said, well, the Jewish people didn't vote the way they were supposed to. And you know, that's the wind of change that's coming across this land. The Catholic people aren't voting the way the Catholic people are supposed to. And the Jews aren't voting the way they're supposed to. And none of the minority groups are voting the way they're supposed to, because they're all sick and tired of what they've been getting and they want to change. And they... Am I getting it in? So they end up and they had a tremendous change, didn't they? Now they ended up and they've got two conservatives, if you believe that. I don't know either of the gentlemen. Both of them, as I understand it, are immigrants, which speaks mighty well for them. Because I said for a long time something's happened to the native-born Americans. They've gone out of style. But Mr. Lindsay hadn't quit yet. He's now suddenly decided he's no longer Republican. He went out to organize his own party. And I heard people who said when George Wallace did that, he was attacking the whole framework of the Constitution. But when Mayor Lindsay does that, he's a great patriot. Well, the voice of the American people is being heard. We haven't stopped yet. I'm not even getting to Rochester, some of those others. I'm going next to Detroit, Michigan. Wonderful young mayor there, Mayor Kavanaugh. Mayor Kavanaugh suddenly on a weekend said he was reading the newspapers, and he said there was a tremendous animosity building up in the American people. And at age 41, he felt he'd done all he'd better do for his city, and he felt he needed to spend the rest of his life working for his wife and children. And he wasn't going to run again. So we end up, what can the American people do? I don't know what they've been doing, but our history is replete that we suffer as long as suffer we can. And we try to live within the established framework. And if the political parties, the national parties, at least meet some of the demands and the wants of the people will work within these established frameworks. When they don't, then the politicians had better get out of the way. Because when you show the American people that little bit of daylight, and you tell them they've got a chance, and they look up there in Minneapolis, and they look in New York, and they look in Los Angeles, they've even forgot what's happening in the South here lately. This is like a herd. You can't stop the people. And this is the answer. We don't dare turn our back on the President of the United States. He's our president. When he's right, we want to back him, and we want him to know we're with him. If he's wrong, or if we think he's hedging, then we have to speak out. We have to write him letters, and we have to encourage him to get back in the pro-American line. Vietnam is going to be his Waterloo, because the LBJ surtax has now become the Nixon surtax. And unless he does something about closing that war over there, that ridiculous police action, he's going to have it called the Nixon War. And I suggest to you and to any that can hear my voice that if we can put our young men on the face of the moon, we can do anything. And I'm sick and tired of having people tell the American people we can't win in Vietnam. I guess they want to win. The history of the American people has always been doing whatever they wanted to do and getting it done as long as they have the leadership that says we will at least try. You know how to win the war in Vietnam quick, I suggest? Escalate the positive thought. Consider what Ho Chi Minh would think if the president and the chief of staff suddenly went at the White House. The president told him, you know how all these ears listen? Let's just make a plan to win, just in case we might want to win. And then he notified the people at Paris, and he said, let's give him a little timetable over there. We give him enough time now. He needs it in the penitentiary. But let's just tell him, if you don't start getting in there, We're going to open this plan for victory in Vietnam. Positive thought. Why, you know what would happen to Ho Chi Minh? He'd break his britches to get to that peace table, to get anything out of it he can. Positive thought is the thing we have to do. The American people can put boys on the moon. They can find answers to every problem. But when for year after year, 12 years, we have constantly told the world we don't want to win, we're not going to win, we're trying for peace, and there is no peace, and we make no headway, don't you think, to use a liberal expression, it's time to back off, to take a new approach, and to start the theory again? Not use the same untouchables and rubber stamps that have got us in the hole in the first place? There's a time for diplomacy. And when the diplomats wear out, then get them out of the road. Don't put the military under the diplomats. I hear a lot about the new left. We've got a bunch of senators, they tell me, that are forming a new party, a new coalition. See, I still happen to be a Southern Democrat. Head of my party told us all to get out. I think in Miss Mary's state they even have a suit filed against her beloved governor, John Bell Williams, to try to force him to say he isn't even a Democrat. And if this concerns you, it doesn't concern me, because all of the noise that is being made by these new coalitions running around, these are the same threats against the American people that were repudiated in 1968 in the presidential election, were repudiated in California, were repudiated in Minneapolis, were repudiated in New York, and are going to continue to be repudiated. They aren't starting a new party. They've just divorced themselves from the American people. I'm from Louisiana. I'm proud to be a Southerner by choice. I'm real happy to have had this opportunity to visit with you. I'm sure there's some of you that are from my native home in Indiana. Others I may have met, some Hoosier out there. But I'm always reminded of the little story. The Lord that made us all, made all life. My beloved Louisiana, He made the crawfish, and He made the oysters. He made the oyster that lives in the bottoms of our bayous that so many of our people eat. When He made the oyster, He said, Mr. Oyster, I'm going to make you a very simple animal. He said, you'll have a home, your shell, that you'll always be in. And because you're going to have your home around you, it won't be necessary for you to go out and work, and it won't be necessary for you to fight. You just lay there on the bottom of that Louisiana bayou, and when you're hungry, you open your shell, and the seawater will run through the shell, and you will be able to absorb the microbes in the microscopic feed. You won't have any trouble with your young, because your young will be born with a shell around them. And then that same God of us all made the eagle. And He told the eagle, He said, Mr. Eagle, I'm going to make you a free agent. You're going to be able to move about at your will. But because you're a free agent, I'm going to give you a mind. You're going to have to make decisions. And because you're going to have freedom, you're going to have serious responsibilities. You're going to have to raise your young. You're going to have to go out and you're going to have to find your own feet. You're going to have to fly and build your own home and defend your young from various enemies. But Mr. Eagle, because I'm making you a free agent, you will be able to fly as high into the sky, almost touching me yourself. Almost touching me, your Creator. My fellow countrymen, the symbol of the United States is not the oyster. It's the eagle that flies atop our flagstaff. Good day. May God be with you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have just one or two words to say to you. They are entirely of appreciation for the attendance you've shown and the attention you've given to our speakers, and for your tremendous cooperation throughout all this rally in making a success. We look forward to seeing you, some of you at least, at dinner tonight here in honor of Dan Smoot, and we certainly hope to see all of you here next year at the 8th rally. Thank you very much.
We will now close the afternoon with prayer by Reed Benson.
Our Father which art in heaven, we thank Thee for this day and for the patriots whom Thou hast raised up in these crucial hours. We miss the ones who've passed from our presence, like Dr. Belladad, Maurice Chambé, and others. Now, Father, we ask Thy blessings to be upon those who are with us still, that Thou will strengthen their body, their minds, and their sinews, their spirits. Protect them. Frustrate the designs of the adversary to take their lives from them before their missions are filled. And Father, wilt Thou bless us, that we might be better equipped in the vineyard to render fruitful service. We know the harvest is great, but the laborers are few. And we know this rally in part was prompted to inspire us and motivate us so that we could go out and bring up additional patriots in the way that this country should go. As we come toward the closing hours of this great rally, we pray that we might rededicate ourselves to the things that have made this country great, that we might work to preserve our inspired Constitution, and that we might befriend it and defend it and support the arms of others who are doing likewise, and protect us on our way home. And may we come to rejoice with those in our home country over the great experience that we've had here, and share with them the wealth that has been kindly dispersed to us. Bless Colonel Bunker and Mrs. McKinney and all the others who've been so generous with their time and means to make this rich opportunity available for us all of which we pray for and thank Thee for, and in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ, amen.